I never saw it coming. Growing up, Jackson and I were as close as brothers could be, despite our 5-year age difference. We both loved the family shipping business our grandfather built. When the board voted me out as CEO after Jackson orchestrated my removal, I was devastated. What my brother failed to realize was that I personally owned the dock facilities his ambitious expansion plan depended on. Now his entire fleet sits idle with nowhere to berth. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button to see how I turned the tables on my backstabbing brother. My grandfather started West Coast Maritime Solutions back in the 70s. He was a hard-working man who arrived in Seattle with nothing but determination and a small loan from a friend. The business began with just 2 fishing boats he converted to transport goods between coastal towns. Even as a kid, I remember him coming home smelling of salt water and diesel, his hands calloused, but always ready for a firm handshake with potential clients. My father took over in the early 90s and transformed our modest operation into a regional powerhouse. He had the foresight to expand beyond simple transportation into logistics management and supply chain solutions. By the time I was in high school, our fleet had grown to 20 vessels serving the entire Pacific Northwest. Jackson and I grew up watching the business flourish under our father. Despite being 5 years younger, Jackson always tried to keep up with me. We spent summers working on the docks, learning the business from the ground up. The difference between us was clear from the start. I found myself fascinated by every aspect of maritime operations, while Jackson preferred spending his earnings on video games and hanging out with friends. After high school, I pursued a business degree at the University of Washington, focusing on maritime commerce and logistics. During breaks, I worked in different departments of our company, from maintenance to accounting, from dispatch to customer service. I wanted to understand every moving part of the business my family had built. "You do not need to work so hard, Cobb," my father told me once. "You are the owner's son." "That is exactly why I need to work harder than anyone else," I replied. "I need to earn the respect of every person here." After graduating, I refused any special treatment and started at entry level in the operations department. Over the next 8 years, I worked my way up through various positions. The employees respected me because I had done their jobs and understood their challenges. By 30, I was overseeing half of our operations as a senior manager. When my father began experiencing heart problems, he made the difficult decision to step back from day-to-day management. At 32, I became the CEO of West Coast Maritime Solutions. The transition was challenging, but under my leadership, we experienced remarkable growth, expanding our fleet by 30% and increasing revenue by over 40% in just 3 years. It was only after seeing my success that Jackson suddenly developed an interest in the family business. He had bounced between marketing jobs after college, never quite finding his footing. When he approached me about joining the company, I welcomed him with open arms. Despite his lack of experience in our industry, I gave him a position in our marketing department where his previous experience could be valuable. "This is your chance to learn the business properly," I told him during his first week. "Take your time, ask questions, and do not worry about making mistakes." Jackson seemed grateful for the opportunity, and for a while things went smoothly. He proved himself capable in marketing and gradually took on more responsibilities. Within 2 years, he had worked his way up to Chief Marketing Officer, and I promoted him to Chief Operations Officer when our previous COO retired. Our father passed away 3 years ago, leaving the company to both of us in his will, 65% ownership to me as CEO and 35% to Jackson as COO. I thought this arrangement would strengthen our bond as brothers while preserving the family legacy. For a while, it seemed to work. Jackson and I complemented each other well. My cautious, methodical approach balanced by his creative energy. Dad would be proud of us. Jackson said after our first successful quarter as the leadership team, The Davidson brothers taking West Coast Maritime to new heights. I believed him. I believed in us. I had no idea he was already planning to take everything from me. The first signs of trouble appeared gradually. During executive meetings, Jackson began questioning my decisions more aggressively than before. What started as healthy debate evolved into open challenges to my leadership. "We are missing opportunities by being so conservative," he announced during one particularly tense meeting. "Our competitors are growing twice as fast because they are willing to take risks." I valued different perspectives, so I initially welcomed his input. However, I began noticing Jackson spending an unusual amount of time with certain board members. They would arrive early for meetings and continue discussions long after official adjournment. When I would approach, conversations would abruptly change topics. My assistant, Maria, who had worked with our family for 15 years, pulled me aside after one board meeting. "Cobb, I do not want to overstep my boundaries, but you should know Jackson has been holding private meetings with board members, Thompson and Wilkins," she said nervously. "They specifically asked not to be added to your calendar." I dismissed her concerns, believing my brother would never undermine me. "They probably just want to discuss marketing strategies without boring me with the details," I assured her. One evening, while working late, I overheard Jackson in the conference room with several board members. The door was slightly ajar, and his words stopped me cold. "Cobb is too cautious. He is strangling our growth potential," Jackson said forcefully. "The Davidson legacy deserves better than stagnation disguised as stability." The following week, Jackson presented an aggressive expansion plan during our executive meeting, proposing we double our fleet within 18 months and take on significant debt to finance it. His presentation was polished clearly, something he had been working on for months without my knowledge. "This is far too aggressive," I argued after reviewing the financial projections. "The shipping industry is cyclical, and we need to maintain reserves for potential downturns. Taking on this much debt could put everything our family built at risk." Several board members, including Thompson and Wilkins, immediately supported Jackson's plan. The division in the room was palpable. What shocked me most was realizing this moment had been orchestrated. The supportive board members had clearly been briefed beforehand. After the meeting, I asked Jackson to my office for a private conversation. "What is going on? Why would you blindside me with something this significant?" "The company needs to evolve, Cobb," he replied coldly. "Either support the expansion or the board will move forward without you." The threat was unmistakable. "Are you seriously threatening my position as CEO, as your brother?" "This is not personal," he said, echoing our father's favorite phrase. "It is just business." Over the next few months, the situation deteriorated rapidly. He had bounced between marketing jobs after college, never quite finding his footing. When he approached me about joining the company, I welcomed him with open arms. Despite his lack of experience in our industry, I gave him a position in our marketing department where his previous experience could be valuable. "This is your chance to learn the business properly," I told him during his first week. "Take your time, ask questions, and do not worry about making mistakes." The final straw came when I discovered Jackson had been manipulating financial data to support his expansion plan. Our quarterly projections had been artificially inflated to make his risky strategy appear more reasonable. When I confronted our CFO about the discrepancies, he reluctantly admitted Jackson had pressured him to adjust the numbers. My plan was to improve the facilities, demonstrate their value, and eventually bring them under the company umbrella at a fair market price. I established an anonymous LLC to make the purchase maintaining privacy, while I oversaw significant upgrades to the docking systems, storage facilities, and logistics operations. Few people knew about my ownership. My financial advisor, the lawyer who handled the transaction, and the dock operations manager I hired. My brother is actively trying to sabotage our future because he cannot see beyond his outdated vision. He is even manufacturing financial concerns to block progress. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. I realized with sinking certainty that most had already chosen sides, and not mine. The next morning, I received notice of a special board meeting scheduled for the following day. The timing, during my planned presentation to our West Coast clients, made it impossible for me to attend without damaging important client relationships. When I requested rescheduling, my request was denied. I knew then what was coming. But nothing could have prepared me for how quickly 25 years of loyalty would be discarded. The ambush was perfectly executed. When I returned from my client meetings the following evening, I found an email requesting my immediate presence at the office for an urgent matter. Upon arrival, I was escorted to the boardroom where every member sat stone-faced around the table. Jackson occupied my usual seat at the head. "Cobb, thank you for joining us," Thompson began with cold formality. "The board has convened an emergency session to address concerns about company leadership." What followed was a character assassination disguised as corporate governance. Jackson presented a carefully crafted narrative of my failed leadership, complete with testimonials from department heads who had been promised promotions in the new regime. Financial reports were shown out of context strategic decisions, mischaracterized as mistakes, and my caution portrayed as fear of innovation. "This is absurd," I protested. "You are deliberately misrepresenting everything about my leadership. Jackson has been manipulating data and misleading the board for months." My defense fell on deaf ears. The decision had clearly been made before I entered the room. "The board has voted unanimously for a change in leadership," Thompson announced without meeting my eyes. "Effective immediately, you are removed as CEO of West Coast Maritime Solutions. Jackson will assume the position with full board support." I looked around the table at people I had worked alongside for years, some who had known me since childhood. Not one would meet my gaze. "You realize this is a hostile takeover orchestrated by my own brother," I said, my voice steady, despite the betrayal crushing my chest. Jackson finally spoke. "Business is not personal, Cobb. It is just business." He had the audacity to quote our father while stealing the company from me. Security waited outside the boardroom. I looked around the table at people I had worked alongside for years, some who had known me since childhood. Not one would meet my gaze. "You realize this is a hostile takeover orchestrated by my own brother," I said, my voice steady, despite the betrayal crushing my chest. Jackson finally spoke. "Business is not personal, Cobb. It is just business." He had the audacity to quote our father while stealing the company from me. Security waited outside the boardroom. On the fourth day, Maria called from a new number. "I quit this morning," she said. "What they did to you was unforgivable. You should know Jackson implemented the expansion plan immediately after the board meeting. They are taking out massive loans to purchase 7 new vessels, state-of-the-art container ships requiring specialized dock facilities." This information barely registered through my emotional fog. I thanked her and returned to my isolation. 2 days later, another call came from Trevor, our former logistics manager, who had also resigned in protest. "Cobb, they announced the fleet expansion publicly today," he said urgently. 7 container ships from Baltic shipyards, twice the size of anything we currently operate. But here is the problem. They need specialized docking facilities for vessels that size. Jackson is counting on using Pacific Northwest Harbor operations for the entire fleet. Something clicked in my mind. "Pacific Northwest Harbor operations," I repeated. "You are absolutely certain?" 100%, Trevor confirmed. "The entire expansion plan depends on those facilities. There is literally no alternative within 100 miles that can handle ships of that size." A wave of clarity washed over me, cutting through the fog of betrayal. Pacific Northwest Harbor Operations, PNHO. The dock facilities I had purchased 2 years ago as a personal investment. 2 years before my ousting, I had identified a strategic opportunity that would benefit West Coast Maritime Solutions long-term. Pacific Northwest Harbor Operations was a privately owned dock facility ideally positioned to service major shipping routes. The elderly owner was retiring without successors interested in the business. Rather than bringing this opportunity to the company immediately, I made a personal investment using inheritance money from my grandfather. 25 years of dedication ended with an escort to the lobby, my access cards deactivated before I reached my car. My personal belongings from the office were delivered to my home the next day in cardboard boxes, some items broken, family photos removed from frames. For 3 days, I barely left my house. The shock and betrayal consumed me. My phone rang constantly, media seeking comments, employees expressing solidarity, even competitors offering condolences. I responded to none. I never mentioned this investment to Jackson or any board members. It was my personal project, separate from company affairs. I had invested nearly $8 million of my own money into acquiring and upgrading the facilities, transforming them into the most modern docking operation in the region. Now, as I sat in my home office reviewing the P&HO operational reports, I realized the full implications of what Trevor had told me. Jackson's entire expansion plan, the plan he had used to oust me, depended entirely on dock facilities that I personally owned. My phone rang. It was Sam Jenkins, the operations manager at P&HO. Mr. Davidson, we received an inquiry from West Coast Maritime Solutions regarding berthing agreements for 7 new container vessels, he reported. They are requesting priority docking rights starting next quarter when their new fleet arrives. Should I proceed with negotiations? I took a deep breath. No, Sam. Hold all discussions regarding West Coast Maritime. Tell them the owner is considering options and will be in touch directly. Do not reveal my identity under any circumstances. Understood, sir. May I ask what is happening? The West Coast representative seemed quite insistent. Family business complications, I replied. Just maintain normal operations with current clients. I will handle West Coast personally. After hanging up, I sat motionless, contemplating my position. Jackson had engineered my removal as CEO, but in doing so, he had inadvertently placed the entire future of West Coast Maritime Solutions in my hands. Without access to P&HO docks, his new fleet would have nowhere to berth. Contracts would be breached. Loans would default. The company our grandfather built could collapse entirely. But another part of me remembered our father's face when he spoke about the legacy he was entrusting to us. This company is not just business, he told us before he died. It is our family history and future written in maritime routes and vessel names. The question became not what I could do, but what I should do. Destroying West Coast Maritime would hurt hundreds of employees who had done nothing wrong. It would erase our family legacy out of spite. I needed more information before deciding my next move. I contacted Trevor again. I need to understand exactly how committed they are to this expansion, I explained. What contracts have been signed, what promises made to clients and investors. Trevor's information painted a disturbing picture. Jackson had already sold shipping capacity that could only be fulfilled with the new vessels. Contracts worth millions had been signed with delivery deadlines starting in 3 months. Investment capital had been secured based on projections that assumed immediate operation of the new fleet. He has overcommitted dramatically, Trevor concluded. Without those ships operating at full capacity immediately upon delivery, the company will default on obligations worth tens of millions. I contacted my maritime attorney next. If I own dock facilities and choose not to do business with a particular shipping company, what are my legal obligations? Assuming no prior contracts exist, you have no obligation to provide services, she confirmed. As a private facility, you can select your clients at your discretion, provided you do not violate anti-discrimination laws. I spent the next week gathering information and considering my options. Jackson had created a house of cards that would collapse without my cooperation. The question was whether I would let it fall or find another solution. Finally, I reached out to the one board member who had seemed least comfortable with my removal, Eleanor Peters, a longtime friend of our father. Eleanor, I need 30 minutes of your time on a matter of urgent importance to West Coast Maritime, I said, when she answered my call. Her voice was guarded, but not hostile. Cobb, I cannot discuss board matters with you now that you are no longer with the company. This is not about the past, I replied. This is about preventing a disaster in the immediate future. The company is heading for a catastrophic failure that I may be able to help prevent. After a moment's hesitation, she agreed to meet me for coffee the following morning. I laid out the facts without emotion. West Coast Maritime has committed to shipping contracts requiring new vessels that can only operate from specific dock facilities. Those facilities are Pacific Northwest Harbor Operations. I own PNHO through a private LLC. Eleanor's face paled as she grasped the implications. Jackson has no idea, does he? No. And the company has made no contingency plans because they assumed PNHO would eagerly accept their business. This could destroy everything, she whispered. Why are you telling me this? Because, despite everything I care about the company my family built, I care about the employees who depend on it for their livelihoods. And I want to find a solution that holds Jackson accountable without destroying West Coast Maritime in the process. Eleanor studied me carefully. What kind of solution? I outlined a proposal that would protect the company while ensuring appropriate governance reforms. Eleanor agreed to arrange a meeting with Jackson, keeping my ownership of PNHO confidential until we were face to face. 2 days later, my phone rang with a call I had been expecting. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. What the hell did you do? Jackson demanded without preamble when I answered. Good afternoon to you too, brother, I replied calmly. I assume there is a specific reason for your call. Do not play games with me, Cobb. Somehow you got to PNHO. They just informed us all. Berthing agreements are on hold indefinitely. You know we need those docks. Perhaps we should discuss this in person rather than over the phone, I suggested. The Waterfront Grill, 7 p.m. tonight. I do not have time for dinner. My entire fleet arrives in 8 weeks with nowhere to dock. Then I suggest you make time, I replied before ending the call. The Waterfront Grill overlooked Elliott Bay, offering a clear view of the shipping traffic that had defined our family for generations. I arrived early, selecting a private corner table with a view of both the water and the entrance. Jackson arrived exactly on time, his face flushed with anger, barely contained beneath his expensive suit. Whatever you did to interfere with PNHO, undo it immediately, he demanded, before even sitting down. You are jeopardizing the entire company out of spite. I gestured to the chair across from me. Please sit down. This conversation will take some time. Reluctantly, he complied. After ordering drinks, I looked my brother directly in the eyes. I did not interfere with Pacific Northwest Harbor Operations, I said evenly. I own it. Jackson's expression shifted from anger to confusion. What are you talking about? 2 years ago, I personally purchased PNHO through an LLC using my inheritance from grandfather. I renovated the facilities, upgraded the technology, and improved efficiency. It was a private investment separate from West Coast Maritime. The color drained from Jackson's face as he processed this information. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious. I own the dock facilities your entire expansion plan depends on. Without my cooperation, your new fleet will have nowhere to operate from when it arrives. Jackson's shock quickly morphed back to anger. This is blackmail. I will sue you for interference with business operations. On what grounds? I asked calmly. I made this investment long before any conflict existed between us. I have every legal right to conduct business with whomever I choose. The board will never stand for this obstruction. The board has already been informed of the situation through Eleanor Peters. They now understand that your expansion plan was built on assumptions you failed to verify. Your due diligence was fatally flawed. Jackson's expression darkened. What do you want money? Name your price for the docs. This is not about money, Jackson. This is about accountability and the future of our family business. Fine, he snapped. You want me to admit I was wrong, that I should not have pushed you out. Consider it done. I made a mistake. Now let us move forward before you destroy everything. A private admission means nothing, I replied. The company needs proper governance and responsible leadership. I am offering a solution that preserves West Coast Maritime while instituting necessary reforms. I slid a folder across the table containing my proposal, a restructuring that would install me as co-CEO, overseeing operations, while Jackson would maintain his position with reduced authority and board oversight. The plan included transparent financial reporting, independent board members, and checks on executive power. This is ridiculous, Jackson sputtered after skimming the document. You expect me to voluntarily give up control after everything I did to get it? Your alternatives are limited, I pointed out. Without access to P&HO, your expansion fails catastrophically. Contracts are breached. Loans default. The company collapses. Our family legacy ends because of your ambition. You would do that. Destroy everything our family built. I am not the one who put everything at risk, Jackson. You did that the moment you decided your ambition was more important than our shared heritage. The waiter arrived with our drinks. We sat in tense silence as he placed them on the table and departed. Jackson stared into his glass before finally looking up at me. Why did you never mention owning P&HO? It was a personal investment. I planned to eventually bring it under the company umbrella when the timing was right. I never imagined you would betray me before that could happen. If I own dock facilities and choose not to do business with a particular shipping company, what are my legal obligations? Assuming no prior contracts exist, you have no obligation to provide services, she confirmed. As a private facility, you can select your clients at your discretion, provided you do not violate anti-discrimination laws. I spent the next week gathering information and considering my options. This is our family business. There must be another way. I gently removed his hand. There is. It is in the folder. The choice is yours. The board meeting the next morning was unlike any in company history. Every member sat rigid with tension as Jackson and I entered together. Eleanor had briefed them on the situation, but seeing us side by side again clearly unsettled them. Jackson spoke first, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. I propose returning as co-CEO alongside Jackson with clearly defined areas of responsibility. I will oversee operations and infrastructure, including integration of the Pacific Northwest Harbor operations, which I have agreed to bring under company ownership at fair market value. Jackson will continue managing marketing, sales, and client relationships. The proposal included additional oversight mechanisms, transparent reporting requirements, and an expanded board with independent members. My determination to pursue this expansion led me to take actions I now regret, he stated, looking around the room. I manipulated information, undermined my brother's leadership, and prioritized my ambition over sound business judgment. For that, I apologized to the board and to Cobb. Thompson shifted uncomfortably. What exactly are you proposing as a solution? I stepped forward, then presenting the restructuring plan. West Coast Maritime needs balanced leadership going forward. He flinched at the word betray, but did not deny it. The board meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m., I continued. You have until then to decide whether to accept my proposal or face the consequences of your actions. And if I refuse, then you explain to the board, our investors, and our clients why your fleet has nowhere to dock because you failed to secure the most critical infrastructure component of your entire expansion plan. I stood to leave. Jackson caught my arm. Cobb, wait. Most importantly, it created a path forward that preserved both the company and the jobs that depended on it. After extensive discussion and several amendments, the board unanimously approved the plan. Jackson and I signed the necessary documents, legally binding us to the new structure. As the meeting concluded, Thompson approached me privately. "I owe you an apology, Cobb. I allowed myself to be convinced that your removal was necessary for the company's growth. I was wrong. I propose returning as co-CEO alongside Jackson with clearly defined areas of responsibility. I will oversee operations and infrastructure, including integration of the Pacific Northwest Harbor operations, which I have agreed to bring under company ownership at fair market value. Jackson will continue managing marketing, sales, and client relationships." The proposal included additional oversight mechanisms, transparent reporting requirements, and an expanded board with independent members. 6 months later, with the new fleet successfully operating from PNHO docks, now officially part of West Coast Maritime Assets, Jackson asked me to meet him for dinner at our father's favorite restaurant. "I have had a lot of time to reflect on what happened," he said, after we were seated. "My ambition blinded me to what really matters. I convinced myself I was doing what was best for the company, but I was really just doing what was best for me. We all have blind spots," I acknowledged. "Especially when it comes to family." "How did you do it?" he asked. "When you had every reason to destroy me, you chose to save the company instead. I am not sure I could have done the same in your position." I considered the question carefully. When I realized I held all the leverage, my first instinct was revenge. I wanted you to suffer the way I had suffered. But then I remembered something Dad always said. "A business is just a business, but family is forever." Destroying West Coast Maritime would have hurt you, yes, but it also would have hurt hundreds of employees and erased our family's legacy. That price was too high even for justified revenge. Jackson nodded slowly. "Dad would have been proud of how you handled this. He always said you had the heart for leadership. He believed in both of us," I reminded him. "That is why he left the company to us together. He saw something in our combined strengths that neither of us fully appreciated." As we finished dinner, Jackson raised his glass. "To second chances and hard-earned wisdom." I raised mine in return. "And to family businesses, both the challenges and the rewards they bring." The path forward remains complicated. Trust once broken, rebuilds slowly. But every day as I walk through the offices of West Coast Maritime Solutions, I am reminded that preserving something valuable sometimes means choosing reconciliation over retribution. Have you ever faced a situation where you had the power to get revenge, but chose a different path? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more about navigating complex family business dynamics. Share this video with someone who might be facing their own challenges with family and business. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the strongest move is not exercising the power you have, but using it to build something better than before.